I'm not sure how to even start this episode.
Broken promises. That's how we start this episode. Broken promises.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
All right. So first off, so we're probably going to be publishing this episode before our second half of our spring sports tech episode. So we haven't forgotten about that episode, but this one, there's a little bit of editing still to do on that episode. And I'm pretty sure that you guys want to hear about us talk about Whoop. So,
of course.
So
yeah, we got Whoop, and are we gonna do other non-Whoop things as well? Are we gonna talk about other?
I mean, we're gonna see if we have time, but I mean, I have a long list of bullet points here that we have to get through. So, so first off, for anyone that's new to our channel or our podcast, so this is the FitFile podcast. So I'm DesFit, and on the other end of the line over there is DC Rainmaker, and we do super in-depth reviews of all sorts of sports technology. And I think our main platform is over on YouTube, and then Ray also has a website, and this is our podcast where we talk about all those things.
Yeah, we cover all the sports tech, not just Whoop and Whoop-like things, but all wearables and cycling tech, as seen behind me, for example, drones, action cameras, anything to do with sports technology, we're going to cover it. And I think the key thing that's probably relevant to this discussion is we've been covering it a long time, right? So we've been covering it since before Whoop was a company, and then through all of Whoop's iterations as well. And you and I have both used multiple iterations of Whoop over the years. And so we know a bit of the backstory as to why the internet might be a little bit on fire at this point and still smoldering. Smoldering implies the fire has gone out. I don't think the fire has gone out. I think it's still burning.
And in regards to this podcast, by the way, so you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. And then on YouTube, we both have a video version as well as an audio version where you can kind of switch back and forth. So kind of dealer's choice on where you want to consume this podcast. And, this is just kind of something great to put on during your workouts or even in the evenings or something like that too.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so I think where we should maybe start is probably the history of Whoop, right? Like what it really is first, in terms of I think it's a very unique product in the fitness and health space for I would say three things. So first off, it's just this small band that goes on your wrist, which, right there. And it's not a watch, it's not a ring, but it's basically like a health sensor. That's essentially all it is, where it's like a heart rate sensor. It has some other sensors in there too, like a blood oxygen saturation sensor, but you can't tell the time with it. There's no display, nothing like that. And it's kind of like this little band that I would almost say it's almost become a little bit of a fashion statement too, in a way.
Yeah, and Whoop themselves have leaned into that heavily. In fact, that's something we'll get into when we talk about going forward compatibility and stuff, but they've really leaned into not just the bands, the straps, whatever you want to call them, and being all different styles and kind of a continual refresh, continual drop of those new bands, but also an entire apparel brand around that Whoop body. So the idea that if you don't want this on your wrist, you don't have to have it on your wrist. You can put it on a pair of running shorts or a bicep band like I have up here for the Whoop 4, underneath, hidden away, underwear for both men and women, bralettes, etc. Like many, many different options. And I've used their running shorts, actually really like the running shorts, like setting aside the sensor. I love the running shorts for hiking because the pockets are really deep, so I don't lose things out of them. So their clothing is pretty good, but it's all about integrating with the sensor. So the sensor then slides into that actual pod, little holder, if you will, on all the different pieces of clothing, so that you don't have to even have it visible if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, actually, I think for us, probably personally, is that I love the bicep band because I can actually wear it on my bicep and then free up my wrist for watches because we're always reviewing watches. But unfortunately, I can't put this 5.0 on my existing bicep band for my 4.0, which is something we'll be covering in this video. So I think both of us are still waiting for our bicep bands to come in for our 5.0s. So,
I'm glad I paid the extra 2-day shipping and I don't have a tracking number a week later.
Interesting.
I'm not salty about that. Anyway. No, not at all. No.
So the second unique thing about the Whoop platform is the app. So since this doesn't have a display or anything like that, you do everything through the app. And the app is, I think just like the band, I think it's what really makes Whoop unique. Where I mean, this is probably one of the best apps out there in terms of like the user interface, the usability, how they actually deliver information, and I would also say how well thought out many of the processes are actually in the app. Like, I mean, like the new health span feature, which we'll talk about here in just one second. There's a lot of actually thought that went into that, and what kind of goes behind that.
No, absolutely. They've long been lauded for their app and the design of it, and the simplicity of it, and really bringing in kind of like two core areas that Whoop is all about, which is called strain and recovery. So the idea that your strain is how much work you're doing throughout the day, and really the only thing that Whoop cares about in the grand scheme of life for strain is your heart rate. So your heart rate goes up, that indicates more strain, and you have a maximum theoretical amount of strain that you can get to in a single day, 21, and that is like your peak strain, right? If you hit 20.9, I guess you can't use fractions of a beyond that, but 20.9, that means that you are as most as you could possibly do. And so each day you can have a target for your strain, and then you have a recovery element that then kind of plays into that. But the idea here is all about the heart rate only. So it doesn't care about GPS because there's no GPS in this pod at all. Instead, you can use GPS from your phone if you do want to record an outdoor activity and see some of that track and then push it off to Strava or other platforms.
And I think that's what makes Whoop pretty versatile, is that with the strain and recovery, I think that a lot of athletes like using that just because of it helps us kind of like manage how well we have recovered and then how well we should possibly push ourselves in a given day. And you know, a lot of this is basically based around, like Ray was saying, really heart rate, where a lot of like the recovery stuff is based around your resting heart rate as well as heart rate variability. And then, you know, strain is just, you know, how hard you're pushing yourself in your different heart rate zones.
Indeed, and they also have basically auto recognition of activities, which is kind of another core component of this. Whoop, as a concept, doesn't actually care about how those activities are divided up. It just looks at your heart rate throughout the day. So the categorization activities is really for you as an athlete to go, oh, I went for a run, and it's really good. Within, you know, the minute time span that I started my run, it will have known that that is my run. I got back from a swim earlier today and it said, hey, here's your swim for that time frame. And it shows these blocks within the app, but it basically allows you to see what the impact of any one given activity was on your strain. But the funny thing is that you can delete the run out of there. Like if I went and deleted run from my day, that doesn't change my strain for the day because the heart rate still went up. And it just goes, hey, I don't really know what that was. Your heart rate was up. Maybe you were doing something more fun than a run. Who knows, right? And so it's all about heart rate. That's all it really cares about.
The one caveat behind that, though, is their strength trainer
That's true.
feature,
Yep.
where if you do actually apply a workout where you put, where you actually enter in the actual exercises as well as numbers of reps as well as the weight, that will definitely affect your strain quite a bit. So that would be the one caveat. Yep. But going back to the auto recognition, to be honest with you, this is probably actually one of my favorite features about Whoop, is that the auto recognition, where it is scary accurate in terms of the time. And I find that it can actually be very accurate in terms of the actual exercise recognition, like in terms of like cycling versus running versus something else. And, you know, one more thing I would actually say about this too, that is quite compelling, is that there's not a lot of friction with this, because what you can do is that, so you can go do your activity and let's say it doesn't auto recognize it. You can still actually go back because it's you know, storing the heart rate data on here, you know, as well as like syncing that with the app. But you can go back in your day and say, hey, from 3:30 to 4:30, I was out on a bike ride, and you can actually add that activity there. And you don't have to like manually start or stop anything. So that's actually it's a kind of a nice feature about Whoop for sure.
Indeed, they've done a really good job of making it simple and making it relatively fail-proof, right? I mean, I don't have many instances where that whole ecosystem has failed in some way, shape, or form, be it software or hardware. It just works, and it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that probably gets to some of the hardware pieces, which is that charging pod that you put on it. Well, in the past, they've had a wireless charger only, where you basically snap this little wireless puck onto the top of the Whoop band, and then it acts like mid-air refueling for your Whoop band, so you never have to go plug it in anywhere else. And that's been really handy because, again, the idea that you're wearing this 24/7, a lot of people, if they take off a watch, they might forget to put it back on again before that night. Then I have the recovery data, et cetera. So this makes it easier to have that that charging kind of just going on constantly behind the scenes.
Yep. All right. So those are the things that I think we love, as well as plenty of other people love about the Whoop platform. But then there's the third unique thing, which is probably different. So the third unique thing about Whoop is that Whoop is a subscription platform. So basically, to keep on using your Whoop hardware, you need to keep on paying Whoop. And I think at this point, their shortest commitment, well, they have like a 30-day free trial, but your shortest commitment basically with Whoop is a year. So with that first year, you get to use your Whoop and get all the strain recovery and all that stuff that we talked about. But you also get this hardware for free, or whatever the term's going to be. But again, like after that year, if you don't pay that subscription cost, well, this is a paperweight at that point, and it doesn't work. So you have to keep on paying Whoop to keep on using it. So this is very unique in the fitness and sports tech, because I would say 99% of devices out there, with some exceptions, like maybe an Oura Ring or something like that. Still think you can still use your Oura Ring in a basic manner if you don't use your.
You can use basic stats.
Right?
I think that's one of like the most nebulous things out there. Like no one has clear information on exactly what happens if you cancel that. But it does require that. Also note that as part of this thing, Whoop used to offer 6-month subscriptions, right? So when you bought the hardware, you used to be able to do that as a first 6-month trial, and now that has moved to basically the first outside of the 1 month free trial option, which is basically just return. At the end of the day, that is simply you're returning everything back to them and getting a refund. It is now 1 year across the board, and 1 year, by the way, starting price is $199, and then we'll go into the different options from there. So just setting that stage.
Yep, totally. Yeah. So, but anyways, this is something that I think all of us don't like subscriptions, but this subscriptions, I would say it hits different, and maybe not in a good way, in the sense that feel good feelings about this subscription, I'm not sure are quite as good as like maybe something like me being happy to pay Spotify or something like that for that. So
that's a really good example, because I think like I get a lot of gratifications, maybe the weird word there, but gratification from Spotify, right? I pay that, and I'm happy with that. I'm not super upset about anything with Spotify at all. In fact, and the same goes with like my YouTube Premium and those sort of things, right? And I think that's because there are competitive options out there to those different platforms, right? Spotify, I can go to Apple Music, I can go to whatever else, but they're all roughly the same ballpark of prices. With Whoop, when Whoop first came out, it was very, very expensive, but there wasn't a lot of options that did what they did as well as they did at that time. But I feel like over time, the competition has largely converged on Whoop's feature sets. They're unique feature sets, if you will, right? In terms of the core bits like tracking sleep and stuff like that, there's been competitors this entire time that have done that with relatively similar levels of accuracy, et cetera. But it's that cohesion of putting it all together into a simple dashboard of strain recovery that Whoop has really, really excelled at. But over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a lot of companies really excel at doing that same thing, right? And we can probably dive into those competitors later on, but whether you're looking at Fitbit, or you're looking at Garmin, or you're looking at Polar, or you're looking at Oura, or you're looking at even Apple in certain areas as well, starting to kind of pull those pieces together, people are looking at that and going, you know what, for a lot cheaper, I can get something that I pay once and I'm done with it.
And I actually have a lot of like Whoop-like Apple apps I'm going to be covering in some future videos. And we can definitely talk about those as well, because they provide a lot of the similar types of feedback here. So with the subscription model though, so before we get into actually the new stuff with the 5.0, the subscription has, I don't know, it's always felt to me like more of like them wanting me to commit than more kind of like the value prop that you get from something like Spotify, where it's like you kind of keep on getting something, where I feel like the Whoop subscription is more like, we just want you to commit to us for a long time. It doesn't feel like warm and fuzzy, like some other platforms out there.
Well, and I also say it doesn't feel like we've seen significant new features over time, right? In the sense that if you look at when Whoop 4 came out, and I look back at my review of Whoop 4, and I look at what I'm working on for Whoop 5, there are new little features there. But considering how much I've now invested into paying, and I've paid my Whoop subscription this entire time, right? So I'm paying that. We're now talking, 4 years later, right? I think since Whoop 4 years, 3 years. It's been a long time.
It's close. It's at least 3, if not 4. Yeah.
Yep. So it was announced basically the end of summer 2021. So we're coming up on 4 years here in a few months.
Okay.
Yep. And so if I look at that, right, and you're paying $250 a year for the tier that we were essentially on in the past, you're talking, close to $1,000 now for this. And while I've gotten lots of sleep metrics from it and it's monitored my heart rate, I don't see like substantial new features over that 4 years relative to how many new other products have come out from their competitors over that 4 years. And, like if I spent, say, $250 to $350 on a new watch from whatever brand you want in that kind of mid-tier price category, in that 4-year time frame, there would have been 2 revisions to that watch which would have had major new features alongside of it, and probably new software as well. Not probably, definitely new software as well.
Yeah. So I think the other part of the not necessarily feeling warm and fuzzy is that the subscription price, unless you actually commit to them for that 2-year period versus the 1-year period, the subscription price basically keeps on staying the same as time goes on. And so, with the first year, you get the hardware for free. Well, right. So every subsequent year, though, I mean, quite frankly, they're making more money because, because the hardware is already paid for, whatever the case may be. So for each subsequent year that you're a Whoop member, they're definitely making more money. But I don't feel like there's any like incentive to actually stay on as a customer. Like I don't feel that like warm and fuzzy of like, hey, we really value you. Give me a 10% discount per year or something like that. Down to a certain level. As I know it can't get down to free, but they have plenty of platforms out there have like more like founders discounts or something like that. But I would love to see some sort of discount as you go on, like, for each subsequent year. It's like, okay, you can, for at your second year, you get a free band or, it's like whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
That would make me feel so much more warm and fuzzy about it.
But to be fair to Whoop, their long-standing promise, though, has been that you are paying the subscription cost to get free hardware replacement and to get new hardware when it's announced. So are you telling me that that's not happening?
And that brings us to the 5.0 release. that leads full circle to the 5.0 release. So all right. So now
this is the scene like when you're watching that moment of the tsunami when people look out across the water and they're like, huh. What's that coming across the ocean right now, right? You're seeing that tide coming towards you. That's that moment there of like, oh.
Yeah. Okay, so all right. Maybe this is actually a good time to talk about our podcast sponsor really quick because this is gonna like go on for a while. So I think it's probably a good time to talk about Precision Fuel and Hydration.
So as Des mentioned, the sponsor for today's podcast is Precision Fuel and Hydration, longtime sponsor here in the channel. And they not only sponsor this channel, but also plenty of sports teams out there, Major League Baseball teams, NFL teams, NBA teams, pro cycling teams, you name it. And of course, their product is a fueling product. So it is gels and drink mixes that you can take while you're out riding. And I use it myself. My wife uses it for her racing as well. And it's something that not only fuels me properly for my stupid long adventures, whether they are a 100K or 100-mile ride, or they could be a 17-hour a day trekking, fueling on those products. But in addition to that, the company also gives back to their athletes or even prospective athletes through their calls. So the ability for you to go ahead and call them up and say, hey, I've got this crazy adventure I want to do. How do I fuel using your products for that? And you can call them up today without paying them anything at all and have that chat with them, with their sports scientist, basically a 20-minute Zoom call. So we're not talking like calling some random number and talking to like some AI generated something or other. This is an actual human, an actual sports scientist that will walk you through their recommendations for your particular activity. And I've done that in the past with some crazy ideas around trucks and stuff like that, where, you know, how to do that and mix real food into it and all those sort of things. So just an example of a company that does seem to really care and invest in their athletes, both the sponsored athletes, their pro athletes and whatnot that you see out there, but also just you as a regular athlete. You can go ahead and try Precision Fuel and Hydration products, 15% off your first order using the coupon code in the screen right there, FitFile. Thanks again to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring today's episode.
Yep. Thanks again, guys. All right. So with the 5.0 release, so as Ray kind of alluded there, so there's now like 3 different membership tiers. So there's like a $199 one tier, and then there's a $239, I believe, peak tier, and then a $359 life tier. So with the 5.0, there's 2 different kinds of hardware too that you could potentially get. So there's the regular 5.0, which is very similar to the 4.0, and then there's the new Whoop MG pod or band, which that actually has ECG and blood pressure insight capabilities. And the MG model only comes on the life tier, that $359 version. So I guess on the good side of it, it's cool that they're offering that lower $199 tier, but that tier, it's going to be missing their new health span feature, and it only comes with a wired charger versus the wireless charger that Ray was talking about just in a second ago. And this is one of those, like, from $199 to $239, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, you're getting a lot more for that $239. Whether that $239 is worth it, it's a whole nother story, but you're getting a lot more for that $40.
And you also don't get the stress monitor or the health monitor as well. And then just for our Euro audiences, those prices in euros are 199 euros, 264 euros, and 399 euros.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a bigger difference, at least between the one and the peak. That's interesting. I wonder why that is so drastically different.
What's also notable too is that in the past, while most people would have been roughly about $250 or so a year for this if you bought it on a yearly rate, Whoop always offered things around Black Friday where you could buy it at discounted rates, getting you pretty close to that $200 price point for renewal. So just keeping that in mind as well. So while this is definitely lower as a standalone price or a renewal price, if you will, or an annual price, it's not substantially lower than it used to be.
What is substantially higher, though, is that life plan. So we have that comes with that, like I said, the different hardware that actually has the ECG and blood pressure insight capabilities. But like I said in my initial video, like this price, I mean, I get that it costs more, but it's like substantially more though than the peak, and it's a little bit tough for me to swallow for sure.
It's a lot more. And so with that additional tier there, you're getting basically 2 things. So you're getting the MG hardware. Sorry, you're getting 3 things to be precise. You're getting MG hardware, you're getting the health screener, ECG functionality. So that is the medical grade ECG, which is doing AFib detection. So you can basically go ahead and just simply do an ECG just like you would on most other devices that are medically cleared. This is medically cleared both in the US and the EU. You're also getting a regular heart rate notifications. So that's a background process that runs 24/7, and it'll kind of report once a day if it sees that. And then you're going to get blood pressure insights, which is not medically cleared. And what that requires you to do is to have a blood pressure cuff band. I have mine, well, that's over there. But so you have to either have that or you go to a CVS, etc., some sort of drugstore, pharmacy, whatever, to do that. You then have to calibrate against that medical device, at which point Whoop will theoretically try to figure out blood pressure from there on out. And that's the piece I'm working on right now as part of my review as to how well that's working in reality. Just for context though, a medical grade blood pressure cuff, so medically certified cuff, at least here in Europe, is between 30 and 50 euros. So we're not talking a very expensive thing to get. And realistically, if you're looking at monitoring your blood pressure, you're likely going to want to have an actual medically certified device anyways, especially once you go down the entire rabbit hole that I've been down on how you take measurements and when you take measurements and all that kind of stuff. Having control around that when that measurement is taken is super important to getting consistent results.
Yep, totally. So those are the prices for if you want to just like get into the Whoop 5.0 platform or the new Whoop platform if you're a new customer. Coincidentally, it's kind of the same if you're an existing Whoop customer as well. And one of the one of the I think core principles or almost like a cornerstone of the Whoop subscription model was the fact that you could get like free hardware at like a certain term. You know, it's like I think if you had like 6 months left on your subscription or something along those lines.
Correct.
I can't remember when exactly it changed.
They had promised repeatedly 6 months left. That's what's in writing. Prior to that, and this is also, you can always get free hardware if it breaks in some way, shape, or form. So ironically, just last week, the band on the little like the plastic part of the main part of the housing has broken slightly on my Whoop 4. So I could have called and been like, hey, my plastic thingy is broken. Can you send me a new one? They just would have sent you a new one. My battery like a year, 2 years ago started dying, lasting only a day at a time, and they sent me a new one, right? So that's no problem. But as far as upgrades go, they had consistently said 6 months, both on writing on their own site as well as their CEO with various interviews. In a lot of places it was said.
Well, and so going back to the whole like warm and fuzzy feeling. So I think this truly was one of the cornerstones of maybe why customers kept on subscribing was that promise. I think that, I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of is that, you know, that's like why people like, all right, I'm going to keep on subscribing so I actually can get that free hardware when it comes out. So anyways, when Whoop did announce the 5.0, so correct me if I'm wrong here. So basically, there were 3 different options. So you could get free hardware, but that's only going to happen at your next renewal date. Is that correct?
Correct.
First of all, okay. Second of all, if you wanted the free hardware like right now, and you had, let's say, 4 months left, or 8 months left, or even whatever left on your subscription, you would pay an upgrade fee. And that would be a little bit different from the peak plan to the life plan, obviously, since it's different hardware. Or you could just renew now and not have that upgrade fee. So this I think was the core thing that lit the internet on fire. And it's like, again, like I think that many people have been very loyal to Whoop over that time period. And again, I think a lot of it was because of the promise of new hardware. And this was the part that people have been furious about, and rightfully so.
Absolutely, and especially when you consider that Whoop sells 2-year memberships, right? So Whoop was selling 2-year memberships and telling those people that they had committed for 2 years, nope, you're not going to get hardware for 2 years. And we're talking that's like halfway through the hardware life cycle of this device, which is absolutely crazy, especially for someone that's committed that much time to Whoop going forward, and likely had in the past as well. And this was also true, even if it had just done it, a few weeks prior, they were out of luck. So whether you were 2 years or down to a year, it was the same thing. And I think, at first people didn't or couldn't find the 6 month, number somewhere, but it didn't take the internet very long to find the 6 month numbers everywhere. Like you and I were having a chat about it. Like we've seen this somewhere. We couldn't figure out where Whoop had buried it away. Because the implication, it was always such a strong part of all of their pitches, was that the hardware is just a small piece of this. They are a software subscription company. Even on my media call with them, Whoop reiterated this when a journalist asked a question around this, and they said, no, we are not a hardware company. We are a software subscription company. We are about the subscription. And that's why everyone's still so frustrated that here we are paying these subscriptions, and like mine doesn't renew until basically Black Friday, November or so. So if I didn't pay an upgrade fee, then I wouldn't get hardware until November, which I know that might sound like silly, but that, again, the whole premise was that you're always on new hardware going forward.
Well, so if you go back to the original video I did about it, you'll notice on the screen that my renewal date was actually at the end of May, and the Whoop 5.0 was announced, let's see here, May 8th or something like that. Yeah, first week of May-ish, something like that.
Yep.
So my renewal date was actually only like 20 days later, like 25 days later. There was no like, hey, you're just right around the corner. Like, we're going to go and give you a free hardware sort of thing. Like, I was going to be renewing anyway. So it's like, it's only that 20-day span, but it was still like, that screen popped up. I'm like, oh, like you guys aren't gonna just like say, hey, like here you go, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I said, I was really, really close on that anyways.
Yeah, so that happened. So keeping in mind, Whoop announced their product on a Thursday. The internet started raging by like Thursday, 1 hour later, and that continued until there was some pushback from everyone across the internet. But I think Bloomberg was probably the one that really called out Whoop the most as a mainstream media outlet, and actually got Whoop to comment on things. And Whoop at the time had said, hey, we just simply made a business decision change. Simply like, we've changed our policies and didn't bother telling anyone. Tough luck.
So I'm going to push back just a little bit for you there, where I think there was a lot of people, a lot of consumers that had a lot of pushback, as well as some media outlets, but there were many others that did not mention anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're gonna
definitely not
So
discounting consumers. I'm talking like actual big mainstream media like entity that pushed back and said, they want to comment, right? They want to comment on this. And I had, in my media call with them, I as well like pushed back. I'm like, wait a second, your promise was this whole thing. And I ended up not getting the device. It got stuck in shipping. Welcome to my shipping world. So I didn't get it in time for launch and it came the next day. So I've been going to wait to publish my review. But it's one of those things where this will be a big part of my review going forward. Like it's a fundamental part of Whoop's value proposition, and they have reneged on this fundamental part of it.
That was the part that I was pretty disappointed in, quite frankly, on launch day, was that, there were some launch day videos that came out, and I feel like mine was one of the very few that was critical about any of the decisions at all, where many others were, quite frankly, just slinging affiliate links. And I was like,
well, I think that's true. I think we can do an entire video someday on like chart ranking fitness companies on their influencer scamminess, if you will. But when you have a software subscription side of thing, it gives those companies much more flexibility to have much higher payouts on the affiliate commission versus a hardware, right? That just immediately takes into the cut of the hardware side of stuff.
So going back to the blowback now.
Okay, so blowback starts. I would say the turning point in Whoop's decision or Whoop's next actions was though that Bloomberg article, because they gave a statement which only made it way worse. And they basically said, hey, we've changed our business policies, to which everyone's like, so you changed the deal without telling anyone that you changed the deal. And that then just poured gasoline on the fire. At which point by Sunday morning, my time, I think it was, or maybe Sunday afternoon, my time, something like that, Whoop then issued a statement that basically reneged halfway on their deal, where they said, okay, starting now, if you have 12 months remaining on your membership, then you will get a free upgrade immediately when you go to checkout. So you can go ahead and upgrade the hardware immediately. And if you already paid and did this because you had 12 months, whatever, we'll give you a credit back for that. Which, okay, that's good for people that have 12 months left, or basically that was solving for the 2-year folks that had 2 years on subscription. But it doesn't solve for the majority of Whoop members, which have under 1 year left, and probably some chunk of them, half of them I would guess, over 6 months left on their membership, which is what the previous promise was that they have reneged on. And as a result, we've seen that people are angry about it.
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes back to the customer loyalty and like, the feel-good vibe sort of thing, where, with all these sort of relationships with companies that customers have, for there to be customer loyalty, like companies need to deliver value, first of all, but companies also need to keep to their word. And then on the other side of things, like, customers need to feel like they're getting value. And if they're feeling valued, they like have no problem being happy and like, supporting that company. But there are kind of like no feelings about that in this release at this point.
And not only that, they kind of double down on it. In their update statement, we can maybe post it on the thing here, they go on to say, this was merely a typo. This was something that should never have been posted to begin with. And they say, we've made a correction, we removed the previous blog article that promised 6 months, and we've retrained our AI to not say 6 months anymore, right? Which is crazy. They literally say, we've retrained their Whoop Coach, which is their AI platform, to not say that anymore, ignoring the fact that their CEO had talked about this publicly in interviews at the time. Like, this was long-standing policy at Whoop, and it was how it was, right? This is what the thing they were promised. If this wasn't that case, then why would they have ever offered the free hardware upgrade thing to begin with, right? That was silly. At no point did they ever say you would get it on renewal only. That did not exist in the Whoop sphere of language on articles out there.
And again, like that was, I think, again, that was like one of the cornerstones of why people kept on paying for Whoop was like, all right, here's that carrot of, the free hardware. I mean, that truly was it. And it was like the one thing that
you had one job
that people weren't getting.
I guess what's funny about this, though, is this is the complete inversion of Garmin's broken promise, if you will, right? In other words, people have implied with Garmin Connect Plus, right, that Garmin broke the promise of free, platform connectivity, all this kind of stuff, right? We buy expensive hardware and we get free software, right? That's what people have said is the promise. I'm using quotes here because that's the words people use over and over again is that there was a promise there. And whether that promise was implied or otherwise, I mean, I would argue in some cases it was more than implied, right? Garmin often talked about there was no subscription cost for data and stuff like that. And while some of that is still true, there's now a gate financially in front of some portions of Garmin Connect, right? So that has fundamentally changed. Even if there are new features, there is now a gate in front of some features. That's the reality. Versus Whoop had the inverted promise, right? Their promise was you pay us and we will give you free hardware as soon as it comes out. And it's funny to see both companies sort of anger their core bases for completely different reasons, but ultimately the same reason, which is breaking either an implied or a written promise on what they're going to do. And what's, I think, trickier about Whoop's promise compared to Garmin's is that in Garmin's case, almost the entire industry is shifting towards some sort of subscription thingamajig that they've attached to their sold hardware, right? So you're still buying the hardware, and then there's some sort of premium thingamajig that they're going to upsell you on. And really only a couple companies are left in the endurance space. That would be Coros and Suunto at this point that haven't announced or rolled out subscription stuff, but everyone else has, even like Wahoo on the bike computer. The app now is trying to upsell me on a subscription service there, and Polar's announced it, and so on, right? Apple, etc. But in the case of Whoop, as we mentioned earlier on, the competition, the level of competition in the sleep recovery / daily tracking realm has dramatically increased in the last few years. It's not just, facing Oura in the sleep realm, you're facing Google and Fitbit and having a lot of those features now free, right? A lot of the pieces that used to be subscription based on, Fitbit's subscription service has now been pulled actually backwards onto the free tier for things like their daily readiness, or not just their readiness score and so on. And so I wonder, going forward, Whoop needs to not only keep their existing customers to be a successful company, but they need to find a way to get new customers as well. And, ultimately we don't know how many people are actually going to cancel Whoop, right? The internet always says you're going to cancel and then they don't, right? That's just a reality of, I would say unfortunate or unfortunate depending on your perspective, but that is the reality of most internet outrage, is that it quickly fades away, people forget about it and move on. In this case, we just don't know how that's going to work long term.
So that was the next question I was basically going to ask is like, so has too much damage been done, or is it, again, is it just, keyboard warriors, that may still keep their Whoop subscription? For me, like I renewed, quite frankly, just because I'm going to be covering these devices. Yep. And by the way, like I bought all my Whoop stuff. Like I actually, we've had the discussion privately, but so I bought 2 5.0s as well as an MG. So like I bought
so much Whoop stuff over the years, and I bought as well more units to come in so that my wife can get some data on hers as well. And so I've got all the units. Yeah.
All right. So to kind of turn that frown upside down. So like, what can Whoop do at this point to salvage this situation? Or, I guess, do you think they even want to salvage this situation?
Oh, they certainly don't want to, that's for sure. Whether or not they will or be forced to is a different question. And ultimately, Whoop is going to see cancellation rates, and they're going to see subscription rates, and those are the two things they will care about, right? And so I think Whoop could salvage it by just going back to 6 months and saying we were wrong again, right? And just going back to 6 months and being done with it. And then I think the internet would largely forget and move on, and that'd be fine. I guess, this is one of the things I struggle with for my upcoming review, is that a review of this device is essentially trying to appease two different audiences, right? It's trying to appease the future person for Whoop 5.0 or Whoop MG, in terms of someone that does not have Whoop today and is looking to subscribe to Whoop in the future. Right? That is one core part of the audience for my review going forward. But the other part is someone that already has Whoop, that is probably interested to know what's going on with this device and whether or not to pay the $50 or $79 upgrade fee, or to cancel, whatever the case is. And those are two fairly different audiences with different goals, right? So that side that's an already subscriber side, they're coming into that review angry, and they want to be justified in saying, hey, don't subscribe to Whoop because they can't be trusted, right? And so I have to acknowledge that in my review and say, Whoop can't be trusted, right? That is a fact now. That's not something you can debate. Whoop reneged on their promise, period. Factual statement. But does that impact the Whoop value proposition within that understanding going forward as someone coming in new, right? Say my wife wanted to be a Whoop customer long term. She wanted to look at this review and say, should I subscribe and pay for Whoop, right? That is the other half of the customer for my review. And it's hard to kind of appease both of those because they're two different groups of people. And in the same way that I try to appease both those groups in review, Whoop has to figure out if they can appease both of those groups as well. Is there too much negative publicity from the group of current customers that will impact those group of future customers going forward at a notable rate? Or after 6 months, a year, will that just fade away and no one will care anymore?
So that's where, with trust, it's obviously really hard to build trust, but it's extremely easy to lose it. And can be nearly impossible to regain trust. So, that's where I'll just be extremely curious about what steps Whoop is going to take to rebuild that, or if they want to rebuild that. Getting back to some things that I would love to see Whoop do. So, first off, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where I just want to see some incentives as time goes on as a Whoop customer. I want to see every year, all right, you get a free band every year, or you get a 10% discount on your subscription. That's something that I just really want to see there. I mean, that would just make me feel very warm and fuzzy as a consumer, and feel like they're valuing my business. Which actually kind of leads us to the last thing, and I know this is a little bit more controversial, is that I wish you could use other devices with the Whoop platform. At the least a chest heart rate monitor to get more accurate heart rate. Yeah.
So it's funny, during my media call, someone asked about that. It was funny. I had a media call that I got grouped in with a bunch of Germans on one of the media calls for them, just my time zone, whatever it was. And it was so much fun because the Germans were so direct in their questioning, unapologetically direct, and very, harsh is the wrong word. They were just very, very direct, and they didn't accept fluff from the Whoop folks that I think are probably a bit used to fluffy reporting answers at that point. From some tech reporters are kind of fluffy. Some are very good, but some are not. And they were so unbelievably direct. And these were bigger publications. These were more mainstream, newspapers and things like that. And so some of the questions I asked, and one of them was around chest strap. And they said, a lot of people struggle in certain activities with the Whoop band on your wrist anyways. When will you support a chest strap, or why haven't you supported a chest strap? And I was surprised. Their answer came back saying, we understand that. We definitely understand that gap in their market there. And it's something that we hear very commonly, and to quote, just stay tuned. So almost teasing as if something might be coming down the road there soon, or soon, maybe not soon, coming down the road at some point. But keeping in mind that people have been asking about this for literally 4 years now, right? Since Whoop 4.0 came out. This is not a new request. And maybe I think they could justify it by saying, hey, there's different Bluetooth hardware inside this unit, which undoubtedly there is, right? We're talking 4 years later. So we're talking different chipset components that could probably do multi-connections better in the past to be able to pull that off. But yeah, I just feel like that should be such an easy win for them to really sort of negate some of the accuracy problems, which are a big problem when you start talking certain strength workouts, which is a huge core demographic of Whoop's like user base.
Well, it's not just strength workouts, like even cardio workouts. Like, I mean,
Yep.
road biking with this,
Yeah.
I'm getting better results out of plenty of other devices for sure. But, this kind of goes back to actually what you were saying earlier about, Whoop's stance about being a software platform versus a hardware platform. I mean, that just kind of just goes in line there where it's like, all right, if you can bring your own hardware, then you're a software platform at that point. And that's really kind of the last thing is that, much as I like how versatile this is too, like in terms of like you can wear it anywhere. So many of us are already wearing smartwatches. So, if you could just, feed your data from your smartwatch into the Whoop platform and them have some sort of like really lower price tier, like a $120 a year tier to bring your own hardware and data, I mean, I would be happy to pay for that at that point, and that kind of brings us to the fact that I'm reviewing a whole bunch of different Apple apps right now that provide Whoop-like feedback, and it's just quite frankly an opportunity for them, in that department.
Well, I think this gets back to something a few minutes ago you said you'd like to see them offer a discount, right? If you've been there a year or two, whatever the case is. And I can immediately say, or I can immediately hear Whoop, executives saying, well, you don't get a discount on Spotify after a year or two, or you don't get a discount on this and that. And the core difference there is that in the case of Spotify, they are paying the music companies, license holders for your usage of Spotify, right? They're paying someone else. In the case of Whoop, yes, they have their fixed costs or variable costs when it comes to, their online platforms and whatnot, but ultimately they're not paying anyone else, right? Your data is just coming in there, really small amounts of data. We're not talking YouTube with video and stuff like that. We're talking heart rate data, just heart rate data. We're talking like the smallest possible data you can think of when it comes to fitness trackers is coming into that. And if we look at the cost compared to, I think Fitbit's probably both Apple and Fitbit are great examples for it, but almost Fitbit's a better example with, you can go buy a Fitbit Charge 6 for $99 and get nearly identical metrics out of the Fitbit platform for free for a one-time $99 purchase and a battery life that lasts roughly 6 days, so the same as the Whoop 4.0 did. And yes, if you want a smartwatch, as you mentioned, many people have smartwatches, and we see that. Like if you go out in the real world, you see Whoop on one side and an Apple Watch on the other everywhere. And again, at $249, Apple Watch SE sitting there, or $400 or $700, depending on what you want, all of which are cheaper for a typical 3 to 4 year refresh cycle than the Whoop band would be. And that same exact data is there. The data is, it's not any different. That's feeding out of those devices.
I think something that needs to be clear though is that, like what we were talking about earlier about being a fashion statement. I mean, wearing this is marketing for Whoop because it's a very unique device that, it's kind of unmistakable, I guess you could say, considering anything that's out there. And, I guess that kind of goes back to the fact that there's a lot of room for competition in this space where, Polar came out with their little band, which in terms of like missed opportunities, that, oh my gosh, like that is the biggest missed opportunity I could ever see. And, I hear in the comment sections in my videos so often about like Garmin needs to come out with something like this, Apple needs to come out with something like this. It's like there's so much opportunity for other companies to get into this space.
Oh, especially. I think, I would agree that, or I would one up your ante on Polar by saying Polar may be sitting on the biggest sports tech missed opportunity for that company in the last decade, right? For them to sit there and have the hardware already ready, selling it to B2B partners for business only stuff that's making them nothing in the grand scheme of things, have the platform ready to go. All they have to do is offer that direct to consumer. That's it. They have everything else is there. Everything in that entire onboarding process, everything is there. All they have to do is offer it direct to consumer and rake in the money. And every single one of these Whoop reviews out there would be comparing it to the Polar device because it's a trusted name in heart rate accuracy. And more importantly, it'd be cheaper, right? Anything Polar would do would be cheaper than what Whoop is doing because Polar would likely either sell the subscription fee that they're doing now for some little things, and they'd sell the hardware for relatively cheap, and it'd be an obvious obvious win. We've talked about this in the past. To me, I am flabbergasted Polar hasn't done this yet.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be really interesting to see if they can actually get out of this pickle, or if this is really going to be a pickle for them moving forward. I think one thing that's going to be really important is going to be a lot of the actual reviews that come out.
I agree. I think there's no way you can have a review of the Whoop without addressing the trust factor, as you said, right? Trust has been broken. Now, whether or not that matters to you as a consumer, totally different thing. In the same way that there's lots of other features out there of watches and devices that we review that don't matter to all consumers, right? So they may say, you know what, I don't really care if I have the latest hardware. I just want the Whoop platform, and the Whoop platform is great for that. And that's a totally valid thing. As we said in the first 10 minutes of this episode, the Whoop platform and the app and that whole ecosystem and how it works does a very good job at doing that. And so you may not care about that trust factor down the road, but it is a core component of the conversation, the review conversation going forward, to promise one thing and then change that, especially when that was a relatively written promise.
So I think probably many of you have already probably typed out your comments and thoughts down in the comment section down below in our YouTube video, which that's a great way to actually interact with us and get your voice to be heard. We certainly want to hear from you, whether you're an existing Whoop customer, what you think about the new 5.0, as well as if you're a prospective Whoop customer, like what you think, like if you're actually going to pull the trigger, and whether or not the rollout of this has affected your decisions.
I think it'd be really interesting to see 6 months from now, 9 months from now, what people think, right? And look at Google Trends and look at all the interest data, view data, and stuff like that, and come back to this sometime next spring and see, has things blown over, or has there been changes as a result of this?
I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. We've probably gone for long enough about it, but reminder again, we're going to go ahead and publish our second part of our, what do we call it? The Spring Sports Tech Tsunami Part 2 or something like that. Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of other stuff that we still have to yet loop back to in terms of the sports tech that's coming out. But the following episode after that, or right around that, we've got a whole bunch of new stuff to talk about. At least a couple watches and some other things too.
It's getting busy. It's getting fun.
No, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, it's like it is wedding season. Like I think one week in this summer we have 3 different events in 1 week or something like that. Like we're gonna be flying everywhere.
Yeah, literally bounce. Yep, good times.
Yep, exactly. All right. Yep. So anyways, if you liked this video or the content, feel free to hit that like button on the YouTube side of things. Feel free to leave us a comment on Spotify podcast. And I'm not sure if maybe on Apple Podcasts, you can leave the review. I can't remember exactly between all those platforms.
If you have an option to hit a star there, leave a review and a star. Not 1 star, but the 5 stars.
Smash all the thing.
All the stars.
All the things. Yeah. All right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks all. Have a good one.